Olivia's chin froze as billionaire Richard Blackwell slammed his fist on the table. 200 million gone because of some black delivery girl pretending to speak Japanese. She smiled calmly, sliding the signed contract across the table. Actually, Mr. Blackwell, I just saved your company. Before we dive into this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more true stories about underestimated people flipping the script on prejudice. Would you have the courage to confront a CEO who dismissed you because of your race? Richard Blackwell paced inside his corner office, the Manhattan skyline beyond the glass doing nothing to calm his nerves. At 42, he had built Blackwell Enterprises with hard-nosed strategy and cold calculation. But now, he faced a crisis like no other. The digital ticker on his desk confirmed. Its stock value down 23% this quarter. The brutal truth. Without closing the $200 million deal with Takahashi Industries, Japan's top tech firm, loan defaults would start in just 60 days. He checked his Patek Philippe watch again. Less than 2 hours until Takahashi arrived. His entire future hung in the balance. The intercom buzzed. His assistant Sandra's voice came through. Mr. Blackwell, Thomas needs to speak with you urgently. Richard scowled. Thomas Chin, his cultural consultant and Japanese translator, knew better than to interrupt. Send him in, he snapped. Thomas entered, jaw clenched, eyes blazing. I quit, he said flatly, tossing his ID on the desk, effective immediately. Richard stared at him, stunned. What the hell are you talking about? The meeting's in 2 hours. Thomas's tone was firm. I overheard your chat in the break room how you mocked Japanese customs and bragged about outsourcing jobs, post-deal. Then you joked about hiring me because Asians are good at math. You called Denise in accounting that black girl, with the attitude for pointing out your errors. Richard's face flushed. You misunderstood. Locker room talk, don't take it seriously. It's not a one-off, Thomas said. It's a pattern. I've been here 7 years. I know who you are. I won't help you exploit Takahashi or anyone else. As he walked out, he added, good luck finding another fluent technical Japanese translator in 90 minutes. The door clicked shut behind him. Panic set in. Richard grabbed the phone and barked at HR. Find me a translator. Fluent in Japanese. Tech background. Here in 90 minutes. After a long pause. Sir, that's nearly impossible. Those experts are booked weeks out. I don't care. Pay double, triple, poach someone. I need them here. The next hour was chaos. Every agency gave the same answer. No one was available. Sandra entered again, uneasy. Sir, should we consider postponing? Richard's expression darkened. Absolutely not. In Japanese culture, canceling now would destroy the deal. Keep calling. Sandra added. One more issue. The catering order was never confirmed. I placed a rush order at Sakura Sushi. They can deliver right at the meeting time. Richard barely acknowledged it, too overwhelmed. Then the buzzer again. Sir, the Takahashi delegation is here 15 minutes early. A cold sweat hit. Everything his company, his career balanced on this meeting, and he was empty-handed. He adjusted his tie and forced a confident smile, heading to the lobby. He had always been able to charm his way out of trouble. Surely this time would be no different. But as the elevator opened and he saw Hiroshi Takahashi standing tall, flanked by serious-faced executives, Richard felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Trying to buy time, he led the group on a second tour of the innovation lab. Takahashi checked his watch repeatedly, clearly losing patience. Mr. Blackwell, he finally said, perhaps we should proceed to business. Our schedule is tight. Of course, Richard replied. Our refreshments just arrived. Let's enjoy some authentic Japanese cuisine before we begin. He gestured toward the conference room, hoping the food would delay the inevitable. Inside, Sandra scrambled to arrange an elaborate sushi spread. Richard's phone buzzed again, still no translator. His heart sank. Takahashi's team sat down, waiting, and Richard had nothing. Then the door opened. A teenage delivery girl entered, with more bags from Sakura Sushi. No one paid her any mind until she responded fluently in Japanese to something Takahashi said. The room went still. A black teenager, maybe 17, in a red and black uniform, was speaking perfect Japanese. She bowed respectfully, apologizing for the delay and explaining that everything was made fresh. Takahashi's stiff demeanor softened with visible approval. Richard's mind reeled. He rushed over and grabbed her arm. "What's your name, Olivia?" "Chin," she said, startled. "Did I do something wrong?" He looked her over. Black, maybe part Asian, delivery uniform, completely unqualified in his mind. Yet she'd impressed Takahashi. "How do you know Japanese?" he asked, suspicious. "My dad's Chinese American. My grandma married a Japanese businessman. I spent summers in Tokyo growing up. I'm fluent in Japanese and Mandarin. I have a college interview in 3 hours." Desperation took over. "I'll give you $500 to stay and translate. 1 hour, please." Her eyes widened. $500. My translator quit. "You're all I've got." He pulled 5 $100 bills from his wallet. Olivia considered it. "I'll need to call my manager and reschedule my interview." "Fine. Just don't tell anyone you're a delivery person. Say you're a consultant." She nodded, took the money, and left to change. 10 minutes later, she returned in borrowed clothes, a black skirt and a white blouse. Slightly too big. Richard introduced her with a patronizing tone. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Chin. She assists with translation today. No first name, no title." He seated her far from both sides. Takahashi noticed, frowning slightly that as Olivia sat. Richard whispered, "Just translate. Keep it simple." "I doubt you know the technical terms." Olivia nodded, but her eyes flickered with quiet defiance. Takahashi began. Olivia translated flawlessly, adding the correct honorifics and subtle cultural touches Richard had missed. Though initially annoyed, Richard noticed Takahashi's approving nod. For 20 minutes, Richard presented his semiconductor innovation, glancing at Olivia, expecting her to trip up. But she never faltered, handling even the most complex terms with ease. The first real hint of her brilliance came when Takahashi asked a detailed question about the technology's heat dispersion system. Here's a rephrased version of the continuation, preserving the core meaning, tone, and structure, while sharpening flow, emotional tension, and clarity. Before translating Takahashi's question, Olivia responded in Japanese with a clarifying question using technical language Richard didn't recognize. Takahashi's eyebrows lifted, visibly impressed. He replied at length, and only then did Olivia turn to Richard. Double quotes, "Mr. Takahashi is inquiring about thermal management during high-load operations," she explained. "Specifically, he wants to know how efficient your cooling system is when processors are running at full capacity in extreme environments." Richard blinked, caught off guard by her precision. "How do you know this kind of terminology?" Olivia remained composed. "My high school science club conducted a project on semiconductor applications last year. I was the team lead." Takahashi, noting the side exchange, asked Olivia another question directly in Japanese. She answered fluently, then turned to Richard. He asked about my technical background. I told him about the project, but emphasized I'm here solely as a translator. Richard gave a tight nod, unsettled by the growing shift in power. Takahashi was increasingly directing his attention toward Olivia, and Richard could feel his authority slipping. This teenage delivery girl who'd seemed like a desperate stopgap was quietly commanding the room. Meanwhile, outside the conference room, Sandra opened her email to find Thomas's resignation letter. It was damning. Thomas hadn't just documented Richard's long pattern of racist remarks. He'd exposed Richard's real post-deal plan using the Takahashi investment to automate U.S. manufacturing and offshore remaining jobs, gutting roles largely held by minority employees. Sandra stared at her screen, torn. Should she speak up and risk jeopardizing hundreds of jobs, or remain silent as the meeting unfolded? Have you ever watched prejudice explode in someone's face? Comment 1 if you've seen someone underestimate a person based on race or age and live to regret it. Like and subscribe if you believe skill should always outweigh bias. Now what would you do in Olivia's shoes? Stay professional or walk out on the disrespect? Inside the boardroom, the tension had thickened. 45 minutes in, Richard's attempt to control the narrative was crumbling. He had initially treated Olivia like a placeholder, instructing her to translate only greetings and farewells while he led the real business discussion. But Takahashi, with decades of global deal-making experience, quickly sensed the imbalance. Each time Richard interrupted Olivia or talked over her, Takahashi's frown deepened. Olivia, just 17, navigated the tension with remarkable poise. When Richard made a careless remark about Japanese firms being slow to innovate, a culturally insensitive blunder, she diplomatically reworded it, preserving his core message while sidestepping offense. Takahashi, who understood some English but preferred Japanese in formal negotiations, noticed her subtle corrections. Rather than being offended, he grew increasingly engaged, asking more questions, but now directed primarily to Olivia. Please ask Mr. Blackwell about their market penetration strategy for Asia, Takahashi said in Japanese. Then he added, looking directly at Olivia, though frankly, you seem to understand our concerns better than he does. Olivia translated the first part faithfully, but omitted the second, maintaining professionalism despite Richard's growing discomfort at her rising prominence. When the discussion turned technical deep into semiconductor architecture, Richard gave Olivia a patronizing glance. This part's a bit complex, he said. Just try to capture the gist. But Takahashi's CTO didn't simplify anything. He asked a barrage of questions about integration protocols, voltage thresholds, and microarchitecture specifications. To Richard's shock, Olivia translated each question fluently, using precise technical language without hesitation. How is this possible? Richard burst out, forgetting himself, unshaken. Olivia replied, as I mentioned, our science club project focused on semiconductor systems for clean energy. We collaborated with researchers from MIT. I'm familiar with the terminology. Richard's face darkened not with awe, but with resentment. He'd dismissed her because of her uniform, her age, her race. Now she was outperforming him in the very room he had thought to control. Takahashi, observing, shifted his focus entirely to Olivia. His questions grew even more intricate, and Richard struggling to keep up exposed gaps in his own technical knowledge. Your translator seems to grasp our concerns better than you, Mr. Blackwell, Takahashi remarked in Japanese. Olivia softened the message in translation. Mr. Takahashi appreciates the clarity our conversation has achieved. Richard's palms were slick with sweat. He was losing control not because of language barriers, but because of his own arrogance. At the door, Sandra watched silently, Thomas's resignation letter in hand. She now knew everything, the racial bias, the real motivation behind the Takahashi partnership, and the planned mass layoffs. She hesitated, uncertain whether to reveal the truth and risk destabilizing the company or wait. Inside, Richard tried to recover. Let's take a quick tour of our prototype lab, he said, grasping at distractions. Tell them we've prepared an impressive demo, Olivia translated. But Takahashi declined. We'd prefer to continue discussing technical and financial specifics, he said in Japanese. Then, pointedly, unless Mr. Blackwell is uncomfortable with such topics. Even before Olivia translated, Richard understood the sting. He smiled thinly. Of course, let's continue. But as the questions intensified, Richard leaned on Olivia more and more. She fielded inquiries about wafer production yields and supply chain scalability. With every answer, the room's power dynamics shifted further toward her, and Richard hated it. Would you, in Richard's position, admit your mistake and value Olivia's skill or double down on control? Comment 1 if you think he should respect her expertise, or 2 if you think he'll try to regain dominance. Like this video if you've ever seen brilliance shift power in a room. Now, what will happen when Takahashi learns the truth about Richard's outsourcing plans? The conference room buzzed with restrained energy. Takahashi leaned forward again, addressing Olivia directly. Your design looks promising, he said in fast Japanese. But how will Blackwell ensure quality during mass production scale-up? Olivia began translating, but Richard cut in with a rehearsed smile. I can address that. Blackwell has always prioritized quality. Takahashi raised his hand. I asked a specific question regarding layer consistency. Please translate my question so Mr. Blackwell can answer precisely. Olivia complied, translating both the original question and Takahashi's correction. Richard flushed. He'd tried to dodge and been called out. Before he could respond, Takahashi continued, addressing Olivia. Perhaps you could share how your school project addressed scalability, just as a reference point. Olivia hesitated, glancing at Richard. He glared, eyes sharp with warning. She translated Takahashi's words faithfully. That won't be necessary, Richard snapped. Miss Chin is just a translator, not a technical consultant. Frantically, he flipped through notes. We follow Six Sigma protocols, Takahashi interrupted, now switching to accented English. But a thought stopped her. This rare chance to prove herself to someone like Takahashi might never come again. I'll keep translating professionally, she said at last. But I won't misrepresent the facts, or make either of us look foolish, just to protect your ego. Richard's jaw tightened, but before he could reply, Sandra appeared from down the hall. Mr. Blackwell, the Takahashi team is ready to resume. Their schedule is tight today. Richard straightened his tie, forcing composure. We'll finish this later, he muttered to Olivia before plastering on a smile and re-entering the conference room. The meeting resumed with Takahashi, requesting detailed financial projections for the proposed partnership. As papers were handed out, Richard leaned toward Olivia and whispered, Tell them our projected ROI is 22% in the first year. Despite the documents clearly stating 17%, Olivia caught the deception instantly. Instead of going along with the lie, she translated Richard's words truthfully, then seamlessly added, The documents in front of you reflect the conservative estimate of 17%, accounting for potential market variability. Mr. Blackwell is highlighting a more optimistic 22% projection under ideal conditions. Richard seethed, but said nothing. Olivia's graceful handling had preserved accuracy and spared everyone embarrassment. Takahashi, now impressed by her honesty and poise, began directing most of his technical questions to her, barely acknowledging Richard. Would your team be open to a tour of your production facilities? Takahashi eventually asked. Richard jumped at the chance to reclaim control and led the delegation onto the manufacturing floor. As they walked past rows of polished machinery, Takahashi's chief engineer began firing off technical questions. What tolerance do you maintain for 14-nanometer components? He asked through Olivia. Richard hesitated, out of his depth. We use industry-leading tolerances across all specs, he replied vaguely. Olivia relayed the vague answer, unease creeping into her voice. The engineer pressed further, inquiring about the cooling protocols during the etching phase. Richard faltered again, offering only generalities. Then Olivia spoke up, cautiously. If I may, during a school visit to a similar facility last year, the engineers emphasized that consistent cooling during nanoscale etching prevents waveline distortion. Perhaps Mr. Blackwell could explain how your facility's methods differ from that industry standard. Her question provided helpful context and gave Richard a chance to expand, but instead of appreciating the lifeline, Richard glared at her, seeing her input as a challenge rather than support. The engineer nodded appreciatively at Olivia's insight. Takahashi watched the interaction with growing interest. Back in the conference room, Richard's nerves frayed. The deal that could save his company now hung on a teenager he had belittled and threatened. And worse, she was earning the respect he so desperately needed. His own bias had led him here, yet he refused to see Olivia as an asset. Instead, he stewed in resentment, plotting how to take back control. His ego clouded his judgment at a critical moment. The meeting broke for lunch, offering brief relief from the rising tension. As the Takahashi delegation chatted privately in one corner, Olivia stepped out to check her phone. 6 missed calls from Professor Williams at Columbia University. Her stomach dropped as she listened to the voicemail. Miss Chin, we waited 30 minutes for your scholarship interview. Due to the competitive nature of our business program, we've moved forward with other candidates. You may contact admissions to reschedule, but priority placement is no longer available. Olivia leaned against the wall, blinking back tears. The Columbia scholarship had been her best chance of affording business school without crippling loans. Her parents, a community college professor and a nurse, earned too much for full aid, but far too little to cover Ivy League tuition. The $500 Richard offered would barely cover application fees. And now, the opportunity she'd counted on was slipping away. Back inside, Takahashi's assistant, Kenji, reviewed notes on his tablet, whispering in Japanese to his boss. I've completed background checks on Blackwell Enterprises. Their diversity numbers are concerning. Less than 9% of their leadership are minorities, despite being based in one of America's most diverse cities. And they've had 7 discrimination complaints in the past 3 years, all settled with NDA. Takahashi's brow furrowed as he glanced toward Richard, who was arguing in hushed tones with his CFO and the company's financial health. He asked. Kenji hesitated. Publicly, they show steady growth, but my contact at First Manhattan Bank says they're highly leveraged due to their new facility. If they don't secure major capital within 60 days, they'll breach their loan covenants. Takahashi nodded slowly. So this partnership isn't just desirable for them, it's critical. His gaze shifted toward the door Olivia had exited through. And what about the young interpreter? She's very capable, Kenji admitted, but I can't find her in Blackwell's staff directory. She seems to be a student, brought in just for this meeting. Takahashi's expression remained unreadable, though something sharpened in his eyes. Interesting, he murmured, that the most impressive person representing them today isn't even part of their company. Make a note. I want to know more about her background. Outside in the hallway, Olivia collected herself as Sandra approached, holding out a bottle of water. Are you okay? The assistant asked gently, real concern in her voice. You look upset. Olivia straightened, slipping her professional mask back on. I'm fine. Just missed an important college interview because of this meeting, she said, forcing a small smile. The $500 will help with other application fees, at least. Sandra's face softened with sympathy. I'm sorry about that. And I'm sorry about Mr. Blackwell's behavior. He's not usually so. She paused, searching for a diplomatic word, then sighed. Actually, that's not true. He is usually like this. I just normally manage to shield others from the worst of it. Olivia studied her, recognizing in Sandra the quiet strength of someone who had learned how to survive around difficult men. Why do you stay? Sandra glanced around to make sure they were alone before lowering her voice. The company's in trouble. This deal isn't just important, it's survival. If Blackwell Enterprises goes under, 423 people lose their jobs. A lot of them are minorities, and in manufacturing, finding comparable positions isn't easy. She hesitated, then added, I found Thomas's resignation letter. He outlined Mr. Blackwell's plans to automate and outsource once this investment goes through. Olivia took that in, her mind spinning. Helping Richard secure this deal might cost hundreds their jobs down the line, but walking away could trigger layoffs even sooner. The ethics of her involvement grew more tangled by the second. "Why are you telling me this?" Sandra straightened, her voice steady. "Because you deserve to know what you're part of, and because I've worked here for 11 years, and I've never seen anyone handle Mr. Blackwell the way you did today. You kept this meeting on track without compromising your integrity. That's rare." Before Olivia could respond, they both noticed Richard watching from down the hall, his face tightening as he witnessed their conversation. Sandra immediately shifted to a formal tone. "The meeting resumes in 5 minutes. Miss Chen, please be prepared for the contract review." As she walked away, Richard approached, having caught just enough of their exchange to deepen his simmering resentment. The fact that the future of his company now depended on a teenage delivery girl filled him with a toxic mix of dependency, and raged out instead of showing gratitude. He leaned in coldly. "Remember who you're working for," he said. "When this meeting ends, so does your usefulness to me." He strode away to his office, slamming the door shut behind him and dialing into a video call with the executive committee. "The meeting is progressing smoothly," he reported confidently, omitting all mention of Olivia's contributions or the earlier tension. "I've managed the translation issue effectively. We expect to finalize preliminary terms by end of day." He took full credit for the progress and reassured the board. "Once the funding is secured, we can accelerate our automation timeline. Outsourcing remains on schedule for Q3. With the board placated, Richard felt momentarily back in control. They had no idea how close the deal had come to disaster, or how much he now relied on someone he refused to acknowledge. He straightened his tie, rehearsing technical responses, determined to reassert himself during the final phase of negotiations. But when he re-entered the conference room, his confidence faltered. Across the room, Takahashi and Olivia were deep in conversation in fluent Japanese. From the few words Richard caught, they were discussing her education and career goals. The balance of power had shifted. Despite Richard's title, he was no longer the driving force in the room. His own prejudice had created this situation, and still, he refused to see that the young woman he'd dismissed was the only person keeping his company afloat. Would you trust someone who already tried to sabotage you once? Comment 1 if you believe Olivia should continue helping Richard, despite his behavior. Or 2 if she should walk away from this toxic situation. Like and subscribe if you've ever faced an ethical dilemma in your professional life. As the legal teams passed out the contract, packets filled with dense clauses in both English and Japanese, the tension returned. Richard received his copy, feigning confidence, but beneath the surface, anxiety brewed. One misinterpreted term could cost millions or hand over key intellectual property. He needed Olivia more than ever, a fact that only deepened his resentment. Takahashi's lead attorney, a stern woman in steel-rimmed glasses, began reviewing clauses rapidly in Japanese. Olivia translated flawlessly, guiding both sides through complex legal terms with poise and clarity. Richard nodded along, pretending to follow the Japanese version. In truth, he relied entirely on Olivia. 30 minutes in, she paused mid-translation, brow furrowing as she scanned a particular clause. "Is something wrong?" Richard asked, tension spiking. She leaned in, voice low. "There's a major discrepancy between the English and Japanese versions of this section on intellectual property. The Japanese version gives Takahashi Industries exclusive licensing rights to all derivative technologies developed during the partnership, not just those listed in the English text." Richard blinked, realizing the gravity. That clause would effectively hand Takahashi control over Blackwell's core patents' most valuable assets. "Are you sure?" he asked, suspicion flickering. "Absolutely," Olivia said. "If signed ASIS, they'd own your semiconductor architecture within 3 years. Was it a deliberate move by Takahashi, or a translation oversight? Either way, Olivia had just saved him from a catastrophic mistake. But rather than gratitude, Richard felt something darker, relief laced with humiliation. He had been saved again by someone he refused to see as his equal. During a brief recess, while the legal teams huddled, Richard approached her. "You caught something important," he said awkwardly. "You're surprisingly articulate for someone from your background." The racist implication hung heavy between them. Olivia's face remained composed, though her eyes flashed. She didn't address the insult. Instead, she responded professionally. "There's another clause in Section 23 you should examine. The manufacturing quality requirements exceed what your current equipment can achieve. Based on what I saw on the tour, you'll need to upgrade within 6 months, or face penalties." Richard's jaw clenched. She was right again. "I'll have our team review it," he muttered, walking away without a word of thanks. Later, while Richard conferred with his attorneys, Takahashi quietly approached Olivia. "Miss Chen," he said in Japanese, "your abilities are remarkable. May I ask, what are your future plans?" Olivia hesitated. She knew Richard was watching. "I hope to study international business," she said carefully. "I was supposed to interview for a Columbia scholarship today, but had to reschedule because of this meeting." Takahashi raised an eyebrow. "Which university?" "Columbia," she said. "Their program focuses on Asian market integration. That's where I want to make a difference, bridging East and West." Takahashi nodded thoughtfully, then reached into his suit jacket and removed a business card, presenting it with both hands, a gesture of deep respect in Japanese business culture. He said, "Takahashi Industries sponsors scholarships for international business students. Please reach out. I believe your insight would be valuable to us." Olivia accepted it with both hands and a respectful bow. "Thank you, Takahashi-san, I'm honored." Across the room, Richard watched the exchange with burning fury. Takahashi had never offered him a card, not even after hours of negotiation. And now the man who held Blackwell's future in his hands was offering professional respect to the translator Richard had tried to discard. His humiliation reached a breaking point. As negotiations resumed, Richard made a reckless move, ignoring his legal team's advice. He attempted to unilaterally change the terms, demanding a larger upfront investment with reduced oversight. And just like that, the most important deal of his life veered off course again. The strategy Richard employed violated a core tenet of Japanese business etiquette. Introducing major changes at the final stage was considered deeply disrespectful. Takahashi's expression hardened instantly. Olivia, recognizing the misstep, tried to soften Richard's demands in her translation, reframing them as clarification points rather than sudden revisions. But Takahashi, who understood more English than he had previously revealed, caught the discrepancy. "Please translate my words exactly," he said in Japanese, his tone grave. "Mr. Blackwell," Takahashi began, "in Japan, we treat the final stage of negotiation as sacred. Making significant changes at this point signals either poor preparation or an intent to negotiate in bad faith. Neither reflects well on Blackwell Enterprises." Olivia translated word for it, unable to shield Richard from the rebuke. His face darkened. "Explain, these aren't changes," he snapped. "They're clarifications of our original terms." Before Olivia could respond, Takahashi stood. "My team requires a private discussion," he said in careful English. The Japanese delegation filed out, leaving a suffocating silence in their wake. Richard's legal counsel leaned in urgently, whispering warnings about the danger of losing the deal entirely. But Richard wasn't listening. His glare was fixed on Olivia. "You should have spun that better," he hissed. "That's your job." Olivia remained composed. "My job is to translate accurately. Twisting your words would have been dishonest and more damaging if discovered." Richard opened his mouth to respond, but froze. Sandra was standing in the doorway, face tight with restrained fury. She held a folder in her hand, Thomas's resignation letter, along with supporting documentation, outlining Richard's automation and outsourcing plans. The message was clear. If Richard kept attacking Olivia, his secrets might not stay buried. For the first time that day, Richard felt truly trapped. His company's survival now rested on the very person he had mocked and mistreated, and his longtime assistant, the one he assumed was loyal, stood ready to expose him. He was unraveling, and still, he couldn't see that his only path forward was to embrace the very diversity and brilliance he'd spent a career dismissing. Do you think Takahashi already suspects Richard's outsourcing plan? Comment 1, if you believe he knows, or 2, if it's still hidden. Like and subscribe if you've ever seen someone's bias come back to haunt them. Now, how will Richard react when he's finally cornered? The 15-minute recess stretched endlessly as Richard paced the room. His world built on ego and control was crumbling. His legal team scrambled through contract terms, whispering worst-case scenarios. Olivia sat still in her corner, calm and collected, the only person in the room not unraveling. Finally, the door opened. Takahashi re-entered alone. A solitary return in Japanese business culture signaled a pivotal moment, either an irrevocable breakdown or one final opportunity to restore trust. Mr. Blackwell. Takahashi began in Japanese, waiting for Olivia to translate. Before we proceed, I must address a concerning pattern of behavior I've observed today. Richard straightened in his chair, forcing a smile. Transparency is important to Blackwell Enterprises, he said with performative confidence. The hypocrisy hung in the air as Olivia translated. Takahashi's gaze shifted to Olivia, then back to Richard. My company was built on 3 values: technical excellence, financial integrity, and human respect. While your technology is strong, I have witnessed troubling behavior regarding the third. He let the silence sit before continuing. Specifically, your treatment of Ms. Chen has been unacceptable. You've ignored her contributions, spoken over her, and failed to acknowledge the critical role she's played in these negotiations. Richard flushed red, but before Olivia could translate, Takahashi switched to English. A leader who cannot recognize talent because of prejudice is not a partner Takahashi Industries can entrust with $200 million. The room froze. Takahashi had seen everything and was calling it out directly. Richard's humiliation boiled over. Decades of unchecked entitlement, mounting stress, and the collapse of his authority ignited in a final explosion of poor judgment. This is ridiculous, he barked, gesturing wildly at Olivia. You're basing your decision on how I treat a temporary translator? She's a delivery girl I pulled in when our real translator quit. I'm not running a charity, I'm building a global tech firm. He turned to Olivia, finger jabbing in accusation. And you don't think I haven't seen what you're doing? Showing off, undermining me, making me look like a fool. You've been in his corner from the start. His voice rose, full of bitterness. I should have known better than to trust someone like you with something this important. People like you always have hidden agendas. The room went deathly silent. His last words, people like you, cut through the air with unmistakable venom. Takahashi stood slowly, gathering his documents without speaking. His team, waiting by the door, entered and began collecting their materials in silence. The $200 million lifeline Richard had clung to was walking away. Olivia rose. For the first time, she addressed the room directly. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of the entire day. Mr. Blackwell, I've translated faithfully and professionally, despite your constant disrespect. I've helped bridge cultural misunderstandings that could have sunk this meeting hours ago. I caught critical translation errors that would have cost you your company's most valuable intellectual property. She looked him squarely in the eyes. Your prejudice didn't just hurt me. It's destroyed a partnership your company desperately needed. If you'd judged me by my work instead of my background, you might have saved this deal, instead of sabotaging it. She picked up her notepad. I don't expect the $400 you promised, but I did earn the $100 you already paid. As she turned to leave, Sandra stepped forward, placing a folder on the conference table. Mr. Takahashi, she said, her voice steady. Before you go, you should know something. She opened the folder, revealing Thomas's resignation letter. Thomas Chinauer, former translator, quit this morning because of Mr. Blackwell's racist remarks, and because he discovered Mr. Blackwell's plan to use your investment to automate our manufacturing division and outsource hundreds of jobs, mostly held by minority workers. She turned to Richard, her voice sharpening. 423 families rely on this company. Your ego and your prejudice have put every one of them at risk. A stunned silence blanketed the room. Richard stood frozen, no longer a CEO, but a man fully exposed, not just as a racist, but as a corporate predator, caught plotting to gut his own workforce for profit. His polished image was in ruins. Takahashi studied him quietly. Then he turned to Olivia. Double quotes, Ms. Chen, he said. Given what we've seen today, I have a proposal. He paused. Takahashi Industries remains interested in your semiconductor technology, but we cannot partner with its current leadership. He glanced coldly at Richard before continuing. However, Takahashi continued, we are willing to resume negotiations under alternative representation from Blackwell Enterprises. He glanced at Sandra. Perhaps Ms. Wilson could represent the company's interests, with Ms. Chin's continued assistance as both translator and technical advisor. Richard froze. This is my company. You can't just actually, sir, his CFO interrupted, voice low, but resolute. As a publicly traded firm with the board currently in emergency session, salvaging this deal under new representation is preferable to losing it entirely. He checked his phone. I've just received authorization from the chairman. Proceed by any means necessary. Richard's face drained of color as his phone buzzed. The message was blunt. Step back and let them save this deal. We'll discuss your position later. Cornered by financial reality and his own failures, Richard had no choice. He retreated silently to his office, forced to watch from behind glass as the teenager he had mocked took his place at the negotiation table. The door closed behind him, shutting him out, not just from the room, but from the future of the company he claimed to lead. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. Sandra took the head seat. Olivia sat to her right, no longer in the corner, but in a place of earned respect. Takahashi's team re-entered now. The real negotiations began. For Olivia, it felt surreal. 12 hours ago, she was delivering sushi to pay for college application fees. Now she sat at the center of a $200 million international deal. But rather than panic, she found herself steady pulling from years of unseen preparation. Business club debates, independent study, model UN conferences. It had all led to this. Takahashi-san, Olivia translated, has requested that Ms. Wilson represent Blackwell Enterprises. I will continue to provide both linguistic and technical support. Sandra brought something no one else at the table had: credibility untainted by Richard's toxicity. As an 11-year veteran of the company, she knew its systems intimately, but, more importantly, she had the trust of Takahashi's team. Our priority is preserving American manufacturing jobs while forging a partnership that benefits both companies, Sandra stated. We're laying the groundwork for something sustainable. Takahashi nodded, launching into a battery of detailed technical and strategic questions. Olivia kept pace, flawlessly translating and, where helpful, elaborating. Regarding semiconductor integration with autonomous systems, she added, Blackwell's architecture enables adaptive learning, reducing processing demands by 23% in efficiency, critical to electric vehicle platforms. Takahashi leaned forward, and in Japan's compact EV market, the gains are even greater. Olivia explained. Preliminary testing suggests up to a 17% increase in range. It's scalable and optimized for smaller battery profiles. Across the glass. Richard watched resentful, but forced to admit the truth. Olivia and Sandra were outperforming him at every turn. Takahashi, for his part, appeared more engaged than ever. When concerns arose about Blackwell's supply chain, Olivia proposed a hybrid model. Maintain U.S. manufacturing, but adopt Japanese quality control protocols, a creative compromise that served both parties. You have a rare ability to bridge our markets, Takahashi said in English. Have you considered a career in international business? It's what I plan to study, Olivia replied. My goal is to build ethical supply chains that uplift underrepresented communities. Takahashi nodded thoughtfully, returning to Japanese as negotiations continued. 3 hours in, he presented a game-changing proposal. Rather than a full acquisition of Blackwell's tech, Takahashi Industries proposed a strategic partnership, one that would preserve American jobs, focus on emerging markets, and embed diverse leadership into its structure. It was better than Richard's original plan, smarter, more ethical, and sustainable. Sandra and the executive team hesitated not from doubt, but from fear of contradicting Richard's earlier directives. Then Richard stormed back in. This contradicts our strategic direction, he barked. We agreed on post-investment streamlining. Takahashi's tone cooled instantly. By streamlining, you mean eliminating American jobs, he said. That violates our ethical investment principles. The CFO's phone rang. He answered briefly, then spoke firmly. The board authorizes acceptance of Takahashi Industries' proposals outlined. Richard stood stunned. He had just been overruled, and Olivia. She remained calm, translating the exchange with quiet dignity. She allowed herself a small smile, not out of vindication, but because 423 families would keep their jobs. Families like hers, who had once suffered when her father's factory outsourced his entire department overseas. Olivia and Sandra, unexpected allies, had succeeded where Richard failed. They had saved the company. The signing ceremony was a media spectacle. Cameras flashed as Richard Blackwell and Hiroshi Takahashi shook hands across the table. But the smiles told different stories. Takahashi's reflected genuine partnership. Richard's was thin, and forced his pride, a casualty of the very agreement that saved him. Behind them stood Sandra Wilson and Olivia Chinda, real architects of the deal. The press was already calling revolutionary. Richard delivered the prepared statement. Blackwell Enterprises is proud to announce this groundbreaking partnership with Takahashi Industries. This $200 million investment will expand American manufacturing while opening new markets across Asia. He hesitated. I want to acknowledge the invaluable contributions of Olivia Chin, he said at last. Her translation skills and technical insight were instrumental in bringing our companies together. Takahashi had made the acknowledgement non-negotiable. It stung but saved Richard's job. What the press didn't know, the deal came with new governance provisions. Richard's authority over operations was curtailed. Executive hiring would now meet strict diversity benchmarks, and thanks to Olivia's meticulous negotiation, outsourcing clauses were banned outright. As the cameras kept flashing, Takahashi quietly approached Olivia. My offer still stands, he said in Japanese. A full scholarship to the university of your choice, plus guaranteed internships at Takahashi Industries' global offices. He handed her a formal letter. Your insight today is exactly what the future of global business requires. Olivia bowed slightly. Thank you, Takahashi-san. I'm honored. A day that had started with a $500 delivery job ended with full tuition, international employment, and the quiet knowledge that she had preserved the livelihoods of hundreds of working families.